Hi everybody, very welcome to yet another live stream here on the Mentor Pilot channel. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. So today on the on the live stream, I'm going to come with a little bit of news and stuff that's been happening during the last couple of weeks. And then I want you guys to ask me your questions as always. If you have a really important question that you really want me to answer, well then use the super chat. I will answer all of the super chat questions. Otherwise, just fire away on your normal chat and I will do my best to answer at least a few of them as well. And those of you who are on the Mentour Aviation app, those I will go in and check as well. So stay tuned.
Wind 31016, everyone right, right on. Third line 31 right. Delta 260. See you later, dude.
Excellent. Right, so what's been happening in the aviation news? Well, first of all, I am back flying. So thank you very much to all of you who have been supporting me. I've been sitting on the ground for about 45 days, which is the longest I've been away from flying for, I don't know, a decade or so. And it's been, an interesting experience that I've shared partially with you. If you guys are following my blogs on mentorpilot.com, then, I wrote a blog entry about it and my thought about it. But all of you who have been supporting me inside of the app and who's been supporting me on Instagram, I want to say a huge thank you to you. So, apart from me, there's a lot of things going on in the aviation world at the moment. So what you guys probably are all wondering about is, what about this 737 MAX? What's happening? When is it going to be back in the air? Do you want to fly it? Now, I am intending to do a full update on this, taking into account things that you probably, might not have thought about. Let's make sure that everyone is here. Yeah, so there's going to be a full video about this eventually. But at the moment, what we know so far is that the FAA have created something called a Joint Authorities Technical Review Group, which is 9 authorities from all over the world that's come together with their technical expertise to re-evaluate the certification of the 737 MAX. That was announced during the last couple of weeks, and they have said that it's going to take about 90 days or so for them to finish this review. Now, this review is not going to be the thing that decides whether or not it's going to be allowed to fly, but it's going to take part in the process. So what has happened is that basically Boeing has not been able to say when the MAX is going to definitely be back in the air, which meant that the biggest operators of the MAX, which are the big 3 in the United States, they have all postponed it to at least at the end of August. So that's what we're standing at right now. It looks like the summer season might be done without a 737 MAX, and that is going to cause some significant problems for a lot of airlines. Both the airlines that have MAX in their fleet, obviously they were counting on using them for their summer schedule. Now that is not going to happen, so they will have to try to find other ways of either canceling some routes or renting aircraft in from leasing companies. But once again, I'm going to do a full video about the kind of impact that the 737 MAX thing has. Boeing has come out and said that they are estimating that the initial loss that they have incurred so far because of the 737 MAX grounding is estimated to be around $1 billion. But that's not counting lawsuits or anything that might come out of the crashes that happened during the last 6 months. That's only, a cumulative cost of having the aircraft on the ground, of not being able to produce, of not being able to give the aircraft out to their customers, because that's what they were counting on when they did a projection of their profits. So it's a lot of money. There's a lot of things, swirling around here, and I'm guessing that you guys probably have a lot of questions about it. That's about the 737 MAX. Once again, I'm going to take some questions. I don't know much more than you do, but I am constantly following the news, and I probably will be able to give you a little bit more insight than what you've gotten from the press coverage. So feel free to ask your questions. And if you don't already, get the Mentour Aviation app, because this is the kind of things that we discuss in the chat all the time. And during the next couple of weeks, it's going to evolve greatly. I know I keep saying that, but I promise you, those of you who have the app is going to see some major improvements. Right. What else is happening? Well, there is a strike among the pilots in Scandinavian Airlines System, SAS, that's been going on over the weekend, and it's still not resolved. I've got a lot of questions about this. Basically, it seems like the two parties, as in the airline and the pilots, are standing very far away from each other. Where the pilots mainly is looking for rostering improvements to be able to predict when they're going to have weekends off, when they're going to have days off. They're comparing to their competitors, which are the major low-fare airlines in Europe, which tend to have stable roster patterns of working 5 on, 4 off, while the roster pattern in SAS is changing all the time, and they have only 14 days ahead where they know what their roster is going to be. So if you're a pilot in SAS and someone asks you, do you want to come over for a barbecue in June, they won't be able to answer that because they don't know if they're going to be working or not. And these are the kind of the main things. But on top of that, there's also a salary dispute where the pilots are trying to get back the money that they lost when they saved the company from bankruptcy a few years back. So once again, when it comes to these are the facts in the matter. The two parts are very far from each other. I'm not going to go into discussion, what I think about this, because politics is not what we do on the Mentour Pilot channel. But it's very important when you see news coverage that you understand that there's more to this than money. Okay, it's very easy for especially the media and of course the employer to go out and just point that this is this is a money dispute. These are spoiled pilots, but you have to look at all of the facts in the equation before you make a decision on what you think or not. And Venezuela. There's a lot of political unrest in Venezuela at the moment. So the FAA has gone out and banned all American flights to fly below 26,000 feet over Venezuelan airspace, and that's because the military has now been involved in the unrest. And of course, with the military, there comes a potential risk of anti-aircraft weapons being used. So the FAA has been taking. But better be safe than sorry. Let's keep our flights well above surface level until things have calmed down politically inside of Venezuela. The escalation of the violence in there it led to an Air France flight. Let's see, the Air France flight 368 had to turn back when it was midway over the Atlantic because of this, because it couldn't or didn't want to enter the airspace. But we're all keeping our fingers crossed, hoping that the political unrest will ease up and that there won't be any injuries or anything associated with it. But it's a good example of how the authorities are kind of handling these things. When they see that there is a potential risk, they should jump into action and do something as quickly as possible. And it looks like that's what the FAA has done in this case. So, the last piece of news that I'm going to take before we jump into the question session. And as you can hear, I'm barely keeping my voice up. So I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this. But the last news, I wanted to end on a very positive note. The Strato-launcher, the world's absolutely widest aircraft, has done its maiden flight. It had a successful, smooth maiden flight where it completed a couple of maneuvers over the Mojave Desert. And just to give you a perspective of how big that aircraft actually is, the 777X has a wingspan of 78 meters when the wings are folded out. Okay, the Strato-launcher has a wingspan of 117 meters. That is an absolutely enormous aircraft. Okay, 2 bodies, obviously built for the Virgin Galactic program, and it's just amazing. The previous record holder, as in the widest aircraft ever to fly, was the Spruce Goose back in World War II era, that had a wingspan of I think 98 meters. It had 8 engines and it only flew for about 1.6 kilometers ever in the entire history of the aircraft. So that just put things into perspective. And without further ado, I'll be handing over to you guys and see what kind of questions coming in. I see there's a few questions on the super chat already. Feel free to continue with that if you want to support the channel. And before I start, by the way, you might have noticed that you got a notification of a new video from me today. That was me having sticky fingers and accidentally released the video. But those of you who had the chance to see it, you basically what you got to do was experience what my patrons do. Because they were the ones who were supposed to get that video so they could preview it, come with feedback to me. So if you're interested in getting those kind of previews, seeing the videos before everyone else, well then join up with my Patreon crew. You have the links here in the description of this video, and you'll be supporting the channel as well. So, Super Chat. Peter is the first one out. Why sometimes on return flight plans use longer routes, clearly avoiding some countries they were flying over before the same day? I don't think that is the case, actually. It might look like that. Sometimes the route networks, the way that the way that the routes are built is that you can't fly the same route back as you came over. All right, we have opposite routes goes on opposite tracks sometimes, and sometimes that might mean very different routes. I have been, for example, I've been flying to Memmingen in Germany, where we take off from Girona. We fly over Italy, cross the Alps, land, and then we take off from Memmingen, and then we fly on the northern side of the Alps on the way back into France and in. And this is just the way that the route structure looks. So it has nothing to do with which countries they're overflying, unless there is actually, like for example in Venezuela, where there's a war that just suddenly erupted. That happened a while back in Pakistan as well, where India and Pakistan were having a conflict, and all of a sudden Pakistan just closed the airspace, and then all of a sudden you might have to do something like that. But generally speaking, we don't really care which countries we fly over, we just follow the flight plan route. Jeremy Canna, thank you very much for supporting. During the takeoff roll, can the captain or first officer suddenly call for more power or full throttle if they think it's necessary? And there is an SOP for pilot monitoring for something like this. Yes, okay. It's a little bit depending on where this happens. So if you during the takeoff roll realize that you have done a gross error when it comes to your calculation of your takeoff thrust, so you've miscalculated your performance, well then the safe thing to do before V1 is to reject the takeoff. Okay, you realize that no, we're not going to have enough thrust to do this, then you reject the takeoff, and that's by far the safest option. Okay, but then you have situations where, for example, you take off and all of a sudden you have the wind changes direction, you get a wind shear basically, and during those kind of conditions you might not have enough runway to be able to stop, and in that case, yes, you can just firewall the engines at any time. The 737 has FADEC engines, which means that the engines are controlled by an EEC unit that makes it it's not going to overboost basically. So even if you firewall the engines, you will still have enough thrust. You will not break them. You will just get as much thrust as possible. So yeah, that can be done, but under very, very specific circumstances. I've done a video about a wind shear escape maneuver in the app. If you want to see that in 360, well, in that case, go into the Mentour Aviation app and get. I would recommend you to get the all-in-one collection. That's $5 for 2 hours of instruction with me. It's everything from how to set up a 737 to how to do a rejected takeoff and evacuation, engine failures, and as you can see, you can kind of check out how it's working, just scroll around, or if you have a Google Cardboard, it'll feel like you're sitting on the jump seat with me, you can look around, right? So I will highly recommend you to check that out if you want to see how, for example, a rejected takeoff, a wind shear escape maneuver looks, both in the takeoff and in the approach configuration. I hope that answers your question. Spyrus G, hi Mentor, no question, keep up the absolutely fantastic work. Yeah, I will. Keep being positive force for aviation that you are for all of us. Well, thank you. I do my best. I really want to give, to be a spark of light in the social media world around aviation. Now, I want to emphasize that what I do and what I say only stands for me. All right, I always speak for my own, with my own knowledge, from my own expectations, my own experiences, and I don't speak for anyone else. But I have done this for 18 years, and I think that I still have something that I can share with you guys, and I really appreciate hearing that you like it. So Joshua Whitman, hello from Atlanta, GA. taking my instrument check ride tomorrow and moving on to commercial course. Subject to 1500 rule here. Any key habits I can develop in that time to help my airline career? Yeah, since you're going to have to do your 1500 hours, it's most likely you're going to be heading for becoming a flight instructor, and that's good, but do remember what the end goal is, right? Do remember that you are going for the airline, so make sure that you don't fall into bad habits. Make sure that you don't, you're diligent when it comes to checklist reading, that you keep thinking in areas of responsibility, in SOPs, and that you really continue working the way that you've done during your training. Because if you don't do that, if you're working 1500 hours and you do so, you build up experience, maybe you become a little bit complacent with what you're doing, there is a possibility that during those 1500 hours you might actually get bad habits, basically, that's going to be really hard to shake. So make sure that you keep that in mind. 1500 hours might take 2 years or something, depending on how much you're flying. So your end game should always be, I'm going to get into one of the airlines, which means that I have to keep the procedures going. I have to teach my students how to do things correctly, and I have to keep the standard up, right? That's basically the only thing. Just remember the kind of, when I tell people how to become good instructors, what I tell them is not to try to be like the best instructors they had. Just try to avoid being like the worst instructors you had. Because everyone has their own teaching style. Everyone is different. So you will never become like your favorite instructor. But everyone can avoid being like the bad ones. Okay? So if you just stay clear of that, remember what it was that wasn't good with those instructors, and you don't do that, I'm sure that you're going to do great. And best of luck on your check ride tomorrow. You know your stuff. Just take a deep breath, get a good breakfast, and go out and kill it. All right? Good luck. Every type of video, get some rest. The cold seems very bad. Yeah, it's quite bad. In fact, I'm getting up tomorrow morning and I'm flying over to Sweden. Not myself, I'm flying as a passenger. Because we're going to Swedish House Mafia has a concert on Friday. So I'm hoping that what I have now is kind of the peak of this cold, and that it's disappearing soon. Because, I don't know, being among thousands and thousands of screaming fans with this cold might not be the best idea, but it's I'm gonna go for it and see what happens. Cool. Let's take some questions from the Mentour Aviation app then. It's very, very active at the moment, which is great to see. So coming into the chat, this is the new look of the chat here, and let's see. Delta Airlines just got a VR headset, will come in tomorrow. Cool, enjoy it. I think that, at least, when it comes to doing the setup, for example, it's nice to be able to sit and look around and actually see what switches to use. That's good for the full setup collection. Right, Mentor sticky fingers. I don't see there's too much questions here, guys. So if you want to ask questions on this, then now is the time to do it. So I'll go up to the normal chat instead and see what's happening. Flying with blocked sinuses is painful. Yeah, it is. That's why, you don't want to, especially not operate with that. I always have my little nose spray to make sure that I can clear the sinuses. The key is to do it before you take off, and then about 10 to 15 minutes before you start to descend, because normally people don't have problems with sinuses while climbing because the pressure is actually releasing. The problem is when you're descending and the pressure is increasing. So make sure to always have nose spray with you. So Tor van Rosenberg, when I say I want to become a pilot, some people told me it must be boring. Any comment? No, that's wrong. There are elements that are boring, just like in any job. You will never find a job where you're constantly excited about what you're doing. But as far as a job comes, it's pretty neat. It's you never know what you're gonna get. Each day is different. The procedures are always the same and stuff, but you never know exactly what's going to happen. You fly with different people all the time. It's just you never really get tired of setting takeoff thrust or wrestling down the 737 when it's a little bit of crosswind. So to those who think that it's going to be boring, it's just because they don't have the aviation bug and they don't understand what you're talking about. So, more questions here. Sam Petros, good to see you here, Sam. What trigger airlines to go out of business? Well, most of the time it's because they just simply cannot get their economy to get together. It's a very, very cash intensive business, and if you have misjudged your fuel hedging, for example, if you are subject to changes in oil prices, and if you don't have your costs under control, that is probably going to be the beginning of the end, because those airlines, they might do okay when the oil price is extremely low, but then if you don't keep the ship tight and you don't keep the costs down as the oil price inevitably goes up, which it always does, then those little margins that you might have had, they will just disappear like that as the fuel price goes away, or personnel costs or overhead costs in general, because it just takes so little this is why people say that the best way of becoming a millionaire in the airline business is starting as a billionaire, and that is true in a lot of cases. It's a very, very tough business to get into. So when people ask me, like, shouldn't you just start your own airline? Like, no, I don't have what it takes to do that. You have to have some extremely good skills in order to be successful in the airline business, and that's the truth of it. Good. There's more questions here. I saw some 737 MAX questions. Have you ever flown the 737 Classic? No, I didn't have the honor to do that. I had some friends that had a chance to go over and fly the Classic for a while, the 400 for a while. And when I started, half of my cadet group went into the 800. I was part of that group, and the other half went into the 200, and they got to fly not the Classic but the Jurassic. And everyone who's ever flown the 737-200 says it's an absolutely fantastic ship to fly. All right, it's like a sports car. It responds very well. It's the size the 737 was originally built to be, which means that all of the flight control surfaces are correct. So it's really, really fun to fly. And obviously it's the old steam gauges. So if you enjoy flying around trying to figure out where you are on NDB needles and VOR needles, well, that's the aircraft for you. How do we perform DME arc with wind and manually? I don't think that this is the forum to discuss that. I would have to show you that using graphics, because it wouldn't make any sense. We just press LNAV, make sure that it's correctly, that the DME distance is correct while we're flying it. But when you're doing it in a Cessna, it's a whole kind of art form, right? This is one of the reasons, by the way, why you need to be a little bit skilled on maths and physics when you do this, because you have to be fairly quick with your trigonometry when you have, when you're a certain distance away from a VOR beacon and you have to turn 90 degrees and then calculate approximately how long to keep on that track before you turn left in order to keep the same distance going. Yeah, that's trigonometric for you. So, Cosmin Gamer 86, I have a question. Yeah. Every time I fly on an Airbus 320 and we're about to land, I hear the faint prump, prump, prump. What could it be? Hard to say. It's depending on where that happens. I guess it's not the that famous barking sound you're talking about, because Captain Joe did a very good video on that. If it's about to land, then it's likely the landing gears that you're hearing that's coming out. Could be the flaps mechanism as well, although it doesn't really sound like that. But it's very hard. You're gonna have to send me an example of that. Cool. So Hashmash sent in a super chat. Didn't have a question. If you do have a question, then just go into the Mentour Aviation app, go to submit feedback. That will send me an email, and I'll ask. Just put the comment as super chat, and I'll answer it for you. So I and Jill, being a pilot boring. Try working shift as a production manager in any routine job. I know which one I would prefer. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say. Like, even the guys that were doing, I know I always keep doing this as an example, but even the guys who were running Top Gear, who basically has as a job to fly around the world and drive the best cars ever, even they got tired of it. Even they managed to screw it up because they were, one of them were unpleasant towards a production assistant or something like that. And that just goes to show that there is no job where you won't find boredom at some part of it. All right, it just doesn't happen. What you have to do, and this is key, guys, is that you have to appreciate what you have. You should be sitting down. I do this. I'm sitting down once a day and be thankful for what you have. Right? It doesn't matter if you're right now studying, or if you're, trained to become a pilot, or if you're a production manager, or whatever you are. There are things that you should be grateful for, okay? And, during my medical episode here, I really appreciated the fact that, I'm getting better. There are people who doesn't get better. There's always going to be something that you're grateful for. And if you try to look at it that way, if you're always trying to find a positive light in your day-to-day job, you will never become that guy who complains, because there are a lot of those guys. During my first 3.5 years as a first officer, I was in a downturn of the industry. I joined just in 2002, which, you had September 11th happening. You had the whole industry going down. All the terms and conditions were falling. So all of the people who had been in the business for a while saw their salaries and their pensions and everything kind of being on a downward trajectory, and that is not good for your mental well-being, basically. So I ended up spending a lot of time with grumpy captains who were complaining about the job, and I found myself sitting with my dream job as a 23-year-old, flying the 737 all over Europe, brand new aircraft, earning more money than 3 or 4 of my friends combined, and I found myself at the end of the day coming home and thinking that I had a shit job. Like, I was unhappy. And I had to sit down and think about what does this mean? How can I be in this situation? And this is when I started thinking positive, And I realized that the reason for this was that people around me was telling me that I had a bad job because they thought so based on their premises, based on how they felt. But that wasn't my case. So I had to change something. I had to get away from that, because sitting in an environment like that is toxic. So if you have people around you that are complaining constantly, those are stealing your energy. You don't need that, all right? Tell them, give them one chance, and that's it. Walk away, because that kind of energy will only make you feel bad. All right, it will destroy what you're trying to achieve, or if you already achieved what you're trying to achieve, it will destroy the happiness that should come with it. So be careful with that, guys. Look after the energy thieves, and do surround yourself with people who give you energy. You know who they are. You have at least 1 or 2 friends that you always feel good with, that always picks you up. I know I have. I'm lucky enough to have a few of those friends. I have a Swedish friend called June who always does this. I speak to him. I always feel better afterwards. Those are the kind of people that you should take good care of. So, James Chen, let's see, retracted his message. Sorry about that. Mark Abarca, thank you. Should pilots always be ready for bankruptcy or pilot strike? I'm hesitant to totally rely on a pilot salary because of the amount of loans I have. No, I mean, you can't go around being constantly afraid that you're going to lose your job. What kind of life would that be? It's highly depending on what kind of airline that you're joining. Young startups tend to struggle. If you're going in, the most important thing that you can ever have in an airline is that the airline have sound finances. All right, by far the best thing. And I'm saying that because that was my phone. I'm saying that because that is what's going to guarantee you stability in your life. Right? Your salary might not be the highest around, but at least you know that salary is going to keep on coming as long as you keep on working. So find yourself an airline that is financially stable. That is extremely important, guys. All right? Much more important than you might think. Strikes, you probably, depending on, once again, it's depending on which country you live, what airline you're about to join. Strikes generally is rare. Like it's not good. It's not something anyone wants. The pilot doesn't want to strike. The airline doesn't want it. The traveling public does absolutely not want it. Okay, so they always try to avoid that as far as they can. But look for an employment at a good financially stable airline. So James Chen, on the subject of cold. Thank you. How hot is the pitot heated to, and can it still be overwhelmed by ice? No, it's pretty hot. Yeah, I wouldn't touch it. I don't know exactly what temperature it is, but it is very hot. All right, it will not be. If the pitot heat is on and working, it will not be overwhelmed by ice. If it fails, it can very quickly be overwhelmed by ice, but it is scorching hot. As in, you can see it if you look at it. If you get close to a pitot probe and you look at it, you'll see that it's even changed color in the front. You know, the metal has changed. You get that kind of rainbow color because of the heat. So it's hot enough. So Anthony Ochoa, hi. Whose aircraft fly higher, small or big? It doesn't really matter, to be perfectly honest. You can fly very small aircraft very high. You can also fly very large aircraft very high. The ones that fly the highest tends to be private jets at the moment. They can go up to, I think, around flight level 500, while the passenger aircraft tends to stay down to flight level 400, up to flight level 43, maybe 440. The Concorde could go as high as, you know, flight level 600 or even higher than that. But that's very rare. Okay, so an aircraft is a compromise. We have the technology to lift enormous aircraft like the 747 or the Airbus A380 up to very high altitudes, but it's a compromise of how much trust do we need to take the aircraft off the ground, how much trust that gives us to get us high enough so that we can get the speed as high as possible, so we can reach as far as possible. And somewhere that those economics doesn't, you know, if you have to go much higher than flight level 430, for example, you are going to need engines that are incredibly fuel thirsty to do so. The private jets, if you've seen the Airbus, Gulfstream 650 and all those, if you look at the size of the engines compared to the body of the aircraft, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so size doesn't really matter. The sweet spots tends to be between flight level, let's say 370 and flight level 430. Somewhere around there is where they tend to end up, unless it's a very special type of aircraft. Cool. So more questions from the normal chat. Hi Peter, did you hear about the Saudi airline flight from Saudi to Pakistan that didn't have its air conditioning working? They flew the entire flight without AC. It was a fiasco. Well, no, I haven't read about that. Now, I wouldn't say that they didn't have AC, because that's what's keeping you alive. Without the air conditioning system working in an aircraft, you basically will not be able to pressurize the aircraft, and you will not be able to fly over flight level 100. So I'm guessing that they had a problem with the air conditioning system. Maybe they had a problem with the cooling part of it, so that it kept becoming hotter and hotter. I've heard about that, and obviously it's not great. It's not something that you want to do for long. As long as it's not dangerous, it can be done, but not to recommend. John Elbake, what's happening with the Max 8 now? I actually talked about that in the beginning of the video. So once I finish with the video and it's uploaded, you can go and you can check that out. I'm going to do an update. Okay. Once again, the update is going to be about how the Max is how this is affecting the airline world, not so much about what the MCAS system and stuff. I've already done videos on that. So let's see if there's any more. So there's more super chat, guys. I think I'm gonna call this a night. I don't want to do much more before my sinuses explode. I just wanted to do this with you guys because I know I didn't do a live stream on Sunday. I want to be able to have this kind of communication with you guys. But what I really want is for all of you now to get into the Mentour Aviation app. Okay. I'm in there a few times a day. Maybe not, now I'm flying more, so I might not be able to be in there for hours on end, but I will be there. And there's going to be other Airbus pilots, Boeing 737 pilots, flight students, loads of people in there all the time. So if you want to go in and you want to support the work that I'm doing with the app, then go in there and you get yourself a collection as well. Very soon there will be a possibility for you to sign up for premium membership. At the moment there are no premium features available, but they will come. You will see them start popping up, right? And when that happens, I want as many as possible to be in there as a premium member. I think I'm going to put the price of about $4 or $5 per month to keep the community going, and I'm hoping as many as possible wants to sign up to that. What do you think of that? Is that okay? It's like $4 or $5. Is that something that you guys would be interested in? You're gonna get some nice premium features. You get to see that soon, and obviously the app in itself will be free. So if you don't want to pay anything, you'll get the app. You'll be into the chat, everything as always. But the more people I get in as premium members, the better I will be able to make the app going forward. Flight school recommendations from every type of video. Once again, if you go into the app and you search for Flight School Contact, then you'll find a video. In the description of that video, we have all of the different people who are in the app who are representing their flight schools. So there are loads and loads of flight schools in Europe. The only one that I know of, the only one that I can recommend, without any kind of problem, is OSM Flight Academy, which is the flight school that I went to myself. And I've been working together with them. I know I can recommend them because they have a very good quality product. There are plenty other flight schools out there that are really good as well, but I haven't checked them. And without me going there and checking them myself, I can't tell you that you should go there. Okay, I can only base that on what other people have told me, and that wouldn't be fair. So Xi15 is asking, the last super chat of the evening: is weather checked for every flight you take? Yes. Right, there's a legal requirement to check weather for each and every flight. We take it in the morning for all 4 flights if we're doing 4 flights, but then at each turnaround we have to verify that the weather is still good, that the forecast hasn't changed for at least our origin airport, our destination, and our primary alternate. So all of that weather has to be rechecked each turnaround to make sure that nothing has happened. And it kind of makes sense as well. You wouldn't want to go towards an airport that's potentially fogged up without knowing it. So checking the weather is extremely important, guys, and it's part of what we do every day. So looks like Barcelona is doing well. I'm happy for you guys. I'm going to sign off here now, guys. Once again, have an absolutely fantastic day wherever you are. Make sure that you stay tuned for the video that's coming up on Friday. Right? If you're a patron, you can already access it. You can already see it. You can comment on it. But if you're not, it's coming out probably around 7 or 8 on Friday, a little bit earlier on Friday, because like I said, I'm going to be on a Swedish House Mafia concert in the evening there. But do it, and if you want to, please share it on social media as well. It helps the channel quite a lot. Take care of yourself, guys. Have a great evening, and bye bye.